Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I'm Rhett Power, your host. Good to be with you here. 10th of February. Hard to believe we are already in February 2021, but we are. And the point of Power Lunch Live is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, people who are doing amazing work in the world that we can all learn from, get better at what we do. Today, we're going to have I think, a really fascinating discussion with Munjal Shah and about the work he's doing in healthcare. And we're going to really get into health literacy. We're going to get into some really interesting topics that I think we all should think about. So we do broadcast on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all those platforms. We monitor those platforms during the show. So if you have a question for Munjal, please do ask. Send us a question through on one of those platforms. We'll monitor those and try to get the question to him to answer. So Munjal Shah is the co-founder and CEO of Health IQ, which uses science and data, big data, to provide special rate insurance for health conscious people, such as marathoners, triathletes, vegans, cyclists, people who are taking care of themselves. He's a serial entrepreneur that's built several companies. Prior to Health IQ, he was the co-founder and CEO of Like.com, which sold to Google, and co-founder and CEO of Andale, which sold to Alibaba. So, Munjal, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, you sold your company to Google. I think it was the next day, landed in the emergency room with chest pains, and where you sort of made a vow to change your life. Can you talk about that? And is that accurate? Maybe I'm overemphasizing that or over dramatizing that, but talk about that story and what led you to changing your own health, but also thinking how people who are taking care of themselves should have better opportunity and better rates on their insurance.
Yeah, no, it's exactly as you described. It was literally the very next day after the deal closed and we'd sold the company, and it was kind of a pinnacle at the time of my, work career. And
you were 37, so you weren't.
Yeah.
You weren't, I mean,
I wasn't, definitely at the age where most people would have kind of an incident like that. My father, though, had his first heart attack in his mid-40s, so we definitely didn't have genes on our side. But it didn't end up being a heart attack, but it was something else. But it definitely, changed my health. And I had been somebody, that growing up, we ate Apple Jacks, Pop Tarts, cinnamon rolls, every day.
As we all did. And you and I are probably about the same age, so this is. Yeah, that was a thing. Yeah,
that was a thing. And actually, my mom came here from. Immigrated here when I was 7 years old. And I remember she's like, this food must be good for you. I mean, these people put a man on the moon, like they know what they're doing. And so I that was my regular diet, and it really hadn't affected me much, but I certainly wasn't healthy. I was a runner and cyclist in high school, but then kind of, stopped exercising once I got to college, did not kind of take care of my health, definitely put on weight. And then this incident happened, literally the very next day. And so it really kind of forced me to relook at myself and relook at my health. And I lost 40 pounds after that, and, kind of decided through both diet and exercise. Unfortunately, as you get older, it's not just exercise alone that'll get you there, as anybody who's over 40 knows. And, just to kind of really change my health. And to a large extent, I always joke, I said, I thought I kind of had done 2 startups and that was kind of the end of my journey. And now I might do something else, but kind of my next mission in life found me. I would say, like, people are like, go find your mission. I'm like, sometimes your mission just finds you.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe some of those are
big flashing lights, it finds you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what happens.
So let me ask you this. We all kind of maybe don't tell the truth so much to our doctors, maybe to our healthcare providers, to probably our friends and ourselves. We probably lie to ourselves that we're a little healthier than we believe. How do you find, because what you do at Health IQ is you find the healthiest people in the country and you give them discount, and you're not a health insurance provider, but I guess you're a broker, so to
Oh yeah.
speak.
So what we do is
How does that work?
we don't give the healthy discounts per se. We give the health conscious discounts. So what we did is we realized kind of health is kind of two parts. There's the cards you're dealt with, which you kind of don't control. And as I articulated, I don't have the best cards. But then there's how you play the cards, which you do control more of. And so what we did is we built in, really what it's a quiz technically, but I also call it kind of a medical instrument in that we've calibrated this quiz to find the people who are health conscious who actually ended up with better outcomes as a result of being health conscious. And so that was kind of our first thing. Was we realized, what we want to do is give discounts to everybody, regardless of your absolute level of health. So, at the beginning of the show, you mentioned we give discounts to triathletes and marathon runners and all those, but we also give discounts to well-managed diabetics. That you might have, formally diagnosed a disease and it's on your record saying you have diabetes, but you're somebody who's decided to really take good care of your diabetes. You're very careful about what you eat. The glycemic index of every fruit. That, yes, people say it's all natural and doesn't have sugar. It has dates in it, but realize that dates have a ton of sugar. And so there's just the people who have taken the time to manage their health well are the ones that we want to give discounts to. Now, it doesn't mean that the well-managed diabetic gets a price that's the same as the 40-year-old triathlete who's in perfect health. It just means that the well-managed diabetic gets a better price than the unmanaged diabetic does. And that's kind of the meritocracy we wanted to create, where we wanted to say, hey, look, let's try to measure people and give them discounts on the part they can control, and not try to price them on kind of, or at least we can't change how the carriers do their main pricing, but we'll add this extra discount on top for every level of health. And so that's kind of what we did. We are not technically a carrier, but what we did is we actually generated the data needed to reprice these policies and to give these discounts. And then on an exclusive basis, we work with the carriers to actually file new products with the regulators and said, here's the discount. And then, of course, we're the ones who do the verification, and we're the only ones who can sell those products from those carriers. And so that's the kind of architecture that we created. It allowed us to actually work with multiple carriers and get these discounts, on more and more products and with more and more carriers, in case somebody's like, look, I really just like that carrier. I want to use, them for my insurance. We're like, great, we have a special rate with them. You just have to prove that you're health conscious.
How do you, based on people's how they talk about their health, and how do you get? You talked about that health quiz. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
So there's a couple ways that you prove you're health conscious to us, and the more of these you do, the bigger your discount. The first is you take our Health IQ test, and kind of the point that you said, our test is not a self-assessment. So it's not like that thing you filled out at your doctor's office. That's like, how many times a week do you drink, and how many times a week do you exercise? Anything like me, you just lied through your teeth on both of them. You're like, I never drink, I exercise every day, And so we realized that there's many scenarios in life where you cannot use self-assessments. Like the SAT doesn't use a self-assessment. It's like, oh no, hey, you're good at math. You're like, oh yeah, I'm great. Okay, it's like, it doesn't work that way, right? So, and I think it's very primal. Like I think if you go back 3,000 years, if you said you were unhealthy, you got fed to the lions. Like you didn't get a good mate. Like bad things happen to you. And so I think it's like very deep in people's psyche that when they have a health challenge, not to share it. And so instead, what we did is we said, look, what we want to assess is really your health literacy and your health knowledge. And so what we did is we actually wrote 30,000 questions. And we didn't decide if a question was good or bad. We just wrote 30,000 health questions with the right answers and researched them. And then we calibrated them with 500,000 people. And then we asked the people at the end, did you go to the hospital in the last year? And how many times? And we chose hospitalizations because people remember when they went to the hospital. If I ask you how many times you went to the doctor, you're like, I don't know. You're like, well, much, there was that one time I forgot. But you remember when you went to the hospital. And then we found the questions that had the biggest, what we call differential. The people who didn't go to the hospital knew them, And the difference between those who knew them compared to the people who did go to the hospital, how many didn't know them, was the biggest gap. And so we looked at the ones that had the biggest differential knowledge. And that ended up being about 3,000 questions out of the 30,000. And then today the quiz is 30 at random from those 3,000. But when you look at those 3,000, a lot of them are operational knowledge questions. I think that's why they work. So they're not, they're not these self-assessments. Instead, they're things like, oh, you do Bikram yoga? Great. Are you supposed to drink water in the first 30 minutes? And if you've never gone, you're like, oh, it's like 110 degree yoga, right? Like, I'm sure you got to drink water. But if you've gone, they tell you to sweat out your toxins and not drink water for the first 30 minutes. If you're a big bike rider, we're like, great, how do you get rid of saddle sores? And if you don't ride a lot, you're like, I don't know, push your seat. But if you ride a lot, it's actually the bacteria in your shorts, they get in the cracks in your skin, and you got to put some antibacterial lotion, or at least get out of your shorts quickly after you go for a long ride. I'm a big cyclist now, so,
yeah,
I know these things, but it's these are these little operational things. Even if, if you're a vegan, we're like, oh, what fruit do real vegans not eat? And if you're just a casual vegan or not a vegan, you're like, well, I thought fruit's the only thing they can eat. Like, what are you talking about? But it turns out the fig hornet actually lays its larvae. I think it's the larvae lay, but in the fig as part of the pollination process. And so you get little bits of larvae if you eat it. So a real hardcore vegan doesn't eat figs. Now, doesn't mean knowing that really makes you any healthier. It's just that the people who tend to implement deeply tend to know that. And so we found these knowledge questions. Now the quiz has been taken 14 million times. And wow. So we're really able to analyze a lot of data and kind of figure out, both the mortality rate of the people who scored well, as well as what's called the morbidity rate, which is, how sick you get. And those are the two things that we built this data set on. So that's like level 1 of the discount. Level 2 of the discount, we go a little deeper, and we say, give us your exercise data, show us your running, show us your cycling. For a lot of that, we use what we call a threshold level. We don't do a frequency test, because frequency is like, oh, show me every week you do this.
Right.
Conscious, like, they tend to do it anyways. Like, we don't have to take this completely distrusting modality of like, you're going to fall off the wagon. No, like, you're not doing this for this discount. You've been doing this long before we came along. I mean, that's really the benefit. And so what we found there was, if we said, hey, can you, if you're, 30 to 40, we're like, can you run one 8-minute mile? If you're 40 to 50, we're like, hey, can you run one 9-minute mile? Because can you swim this distance in this time? Can you deadlift 1.5 times your body weight? Can you do, we realized that you can't go and run an 8-minute mile and you never ran all year. Like, it just doesn't happen. So if you can just prove it once, it's less brittle, it's less kind of friction, but it still achieves basically the objective. On the senior side, we realized steps matter. Like, there's actually this great research study I can show you that basically shows, steps are what they call in science a good dose response, meaning kind of the bigger the dose, the better the effect. More steps, it just literally lowers all-cause mortality from like an index of 1 down to 0.3, so almost 70% reduction at about 6,500 steps. So there's not a lot of value over 6,500, by the way. So it keeps going down and then it kind of flattens out. So don't take more than 6,500 if you really want to be efficient. But that's what we found is the second is the exercise. The third is, we do ultimately think about your diet, your exercise, and your genes come together to produce kind of, really your metabolic markers. And in the end, you're not healthy because you're skinny. You're not healthy because you look fit. You're healthy because you're healthy on the inside. Like, this is really like, don't judge a book by its cover. There are people who look obese, but are actually quite healthy inside. And there's people who look skinny, but are really unhealthy. And yes, in general, being a lower weight tends to mean you have better metabolics, but not necessarily. And so the third level of discount we give is, if you'll submit an blood test or you'll take a near one, we'll give you kind of the last level of discount, because that is kind of the net of it all. Your diet, exercise together, are you bending the curve enough to kind of get your cholesterol in the right number, to get your A1C or your blood sugar in the right level? And so, we took this total approach with this quiz at the beginning, and it's almost like, do you know what to do? Do you do it? And then are you getting the results?
Right.
And those three levels, if you think about kind of what we've built. And we've done that in a number of insurance products that we can talk about more. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's all really fascinating. I mean, do you think that, I mean, that brings up a lot of questions in terms of where we're going with technology and insurance. Are things like genetic tests, I'm sure you talk about that, have this discussion all the time, genetic tests, blood, I mean, is that all going to be, is insurance going to be based on that in the future, do you think? And whether or not I get my steps in through my Apple Watch, which goes straight to the insurance company to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
I would say the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act actually doesn't allow you to use genetics in pricing for certain types of insurances. Certain types you can, but certain types you can't. So health insurance you can't, as an example. Second, actually, genetics has been a little bit of a failure in producing accurate predictions about one's risk. And I think, a friend of mine said this better. There's something called epigenetics, which we think now that might be the key. And epigenetics are like these little modifications that happen to your genes based upon environmental factors. So, kids who are born during a famine or were actually gestating in their mother's womb during a famine tend to be more obese and have slower metabolisms later. Well, that their genes didn't change while they were in the womb. It's just these epigenetics modified some markers that made them more calorie efficient because they thought they were going to be born in a famine, right? And so in a low calorie environment. But somebody said this analogy to me. He said, think about, we thought genes were kind of the key determinant, but now really the answer is, your body is the hardware. Your genes are kind of the operating system. Your epigenetics is your software. And then the outcome comes out of all of that. And I think we don't even understand enough about genetics. I mean, there's a few things that are very clear. Okay, this causes this increases your risk of breast cancer. But you'd be surprised how much still is an interaction between kind of your body, your exercise, and many other factors. And so I think that maybe, but I would say there's still a lot for us to try to understand in kind of how all these things interact. But today it's not used in any of the insurance pricing, and nor do I see that on the horizon.
You were getting ready to go there, and I do want to go there now, but you talk a lot about health literacy, and I think you were getting ready to talk about, it really is, it's a matter of what you eat and the exercise and things like that. I mean, we've been talking about that. Talk about health literacy a little bit, because I think that, and then I want to talk about a little bit from that. We're going through a pandemic, and we're going through where a lot of people are. I mean, there's the unemployment numbers are pretty staggering now.
Right.
And how you can eat well, even if you're on a budget, because I think there's, particularly in rural places, I think we get in this cycle of eating poorly and maybe not having access to some of the better fruits and vegetables and things. So talk a little bit about that and how we can eat well, and talk about health literacy a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's like yours and I's upbringing. I mean, I was born in a fairly middle-class family that was definitely educated. My father had done a graduate degree at Berkeley, and yet we were eating horribly. And so, it turns out being educated and being health literate are not the same thing. I kind of think about this and I say, we spent how many decades and really the last century trying to improve literacy around the world. Like maybe we should be improving health literacy next, because we have achieved largely literacy at a pretty high level in most countries. But what you don't realize is you actually need a very granular level of health knowledge. It's not just, oh, here's carbs and here's fats and here's this. It's like, well, that thing that you're about to pick off the shelf, like it has this in it. Did you know that? I mean, I remember for many years, if I went out, and I don't really drink very much anymore, but I used to at least have a cocktail every now and then. I'd order gin and tonic, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And I never actually made a gin and tonic at home when I went out. And then one day I actually like somehow ran across a tonic water thing as I was trying to lose my 40 pounds. And I remember turning it over and I'm like, what? It's got like 20 grams of sugar in like one, like, I'm like, it's not tonic water. It's basically 7-Up. And
Right.
and I had never known that. Like the whole time I kind of thought the tonic water was like club
The
soda.
healthy part.
Like, I just thought it was just bubbly water. I'm like, oh God, I guess the sweetness must come from the gin. But it's 7-Up and gin basically. And so like, that's just an ignorance that I had. And I think for many people, they're just not aware of, what's in what does things to you, how eating a certain way is just less advantageous. And like, I think I wish we spent as much time kind of giving people the user manual of the body, which we really don't, and that's what health literacy is about. It's like, and then if we can get better, it's the user manual of your body, which there's a lot of precision medicine and things like that. And there's even devices now. There's a company called Levels Health that gives you this blood sugar monitor that's made by Abbott Labs that actually diabetics have had for a long time. Levels just puts a nice app around it. And prescribes it to you. So there actually have physicians that'll prescribe it to you, but it's a little thing, goes in your skin and it tells you how your blood sugar changes based on what you eat. Wow. But it's for you, right? Your body, your reaction, your blood sugar, not the general thing of, oh, this has this much sugar, so probably it spikes your blood this much. And so I wore it for a number of weeks and just started experimenting. I'm like, okay, because if you spike your blood sugar, you spike insulin, which means you start putting on weight. As you gain more weight, you get central obesity, and that leads to visceral fat, and that leads to higher cholesterol. I'm like, okay, so I'm back it all up. I'm like, okay, let's not spike our blood sugar too much. And as I did that, I found some surprising things. I found, things like, oh, when I eat chips, it spikes. But actually, when I eat chips with a ton of cheese on it, it spikes way less. And so I'm like, at some point, sometimes you do have to eat things that you enjoy, and you can't just like eat nothing. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, why is that? And I look it up, and it turns out there is this saying amongst a lot of dietitians, which is never eat naked carbs. Try to always eat something with fat, with carbs, because it turns out the fat buffers the absorption in your stomach of the carbs. And it slows down the absorption and makes the sugar spike not be nearly as big from the carbohydrates. And they've known this for a long time. They just said it. And I'm like, oh, here it is. I proved it. And I did it again. I did this like experiment 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, and so you can, and I found a bunch of things that had hidden sugars in them. I didn't know it because I ate it. And I'm like, oh, this is a good breakfast. And then all of a sudden, like, I just looked and my thing goes, and I'm like, what the heck was in that? And I found some hidden sugar and some sauce that I just had no idea was there. And so a lot of this is about just educating on what's in what, and understanding the impacts. And then second, understanding the impacts for you. So for me personally, I found I'm very sensitive to bread. People are like, oh, eat a, high fiber bread with, lots of different seeds in it, or oats, or, okay, great. It doesn't matter. For me, every bread, my blood sugar goes high and stays high for hours, like hours. And so if I'm like, for me, there's no good bread. Like there's just none. And so, I still eat some bread, but I try to avoid it, mostly because it also inflames my back, and I have kind of back issues now. But it's definitely like, so these are the things I think people need to be able to be educated on, as well as, to really then also personalize for themselves by using some of these new tools. And I mean, the Freestyle Libre is, I think you can use your phone as the sensor now, and the actual sensor itself is $30 for 2 weeks. You don't really need to wear it all the time. You really need to wear it for maybe, I found after about 4 weeks, I'd kind of eaten most of the things that I normally eat, and I was able to figure out what most of them did. So it's, it's kind of it's insane that we don't help people to understand their bodies, and we don't have like a process for doing that early in life. It would dramatically change the quality of life and the amount we have to spend on healthcare in this country.
I mean, it seems to me it goes hand in hand with a lot of things that we could do better, and even high school and earlier, right? Where you're, I mean, I think we should be doing financial literacy in high school, with some
Sure,
sort
yeah.
of, you know, so, but this makes sense in a lot of ways too, where you learn, you get that user's manual, so to speak, right? And you figure out what's good, what's good for you. But um, can where can people go to get good information on health literacy? Because there got to be some good resources.
I mean, there's, actually, the New York Times does a lot of great, their health section has a lot of great summaries, and especially new breaking research that's out there. And so, I mean, that's one area. The other area is obviously a nutritionist and some folks who know, although, sometimes they are opposed to, for example, low carb diet. They'll say, that's really bad for you, but, it may be, but for some people, as I identified for myself, it made a very big difference in managing my own health. I would say that, there are many good resources online. You just want to make sure they're kind of backed by science. Your kind of bro lifting magazines are probably not a place. Although I will tell you that, there are some things that, like bodybuilders will have this saying of kind of abs are made in the kitchen, not in the gym. And that is really true. Like, you cannot actually exercise your way to being lean. You have to eat extremely carefully to getting the level of leanness that they get. And so there are some insights they have that are accurate, but I would say by and large, really go to your online sources. Honestly, whenever I hear something, I go to a site called PubMed, which is where all the scientific papers are published, and I read those. But I mean, they're a little dense, and well, they're a lot dense actually, and they're pretty nerdy. But I always want to make sure I understand the science of it and not just kind of, the consumerized version of it. But I think that in general, we do that. We actually verify all our quizzes. So we have experts who, validate that the questions are accurate. We research them. We have a research team that does that. And we have a daily quiz that comes out that helps to educate you in our Health IQ app, which you can find in the App Store. But but in general, there's that. But I think there's much made about a few cases where somebody put out something that's just wrong, and it was kind of pushed through the media. But most of the stuff is common sense, and if you eat like your grandma ate, you're probably okay by and large. Like there's many things. I will buy the latest iPhone. I never want to be on the leading edge of the newest food or the newest drug, or like I actually want to be a laggard, like a really, really antiquated laggard on health, and actually go back like 100 years.
No, I mean, my grandparents ate from their garden and from the farm, and I mean, they were healthy. They didn't have any of those things that we suffer from today.
I met with a professor who's part of an agriculture school, probably one of the best in the country. And I'll leave the school and her name out of it. But I was asking her, what have you learned that's really interesting about nutrition? And she said, all those antioxidants that you get from fruits and vegetables, people don't realize. And she did this because she did she put them through what do you call it? The device that basically I forget the name of it, but it takes and analyzes all the molecules that make up something. And she said, what we did is we looked at that like right after you picked a fruit, and then we looked at how much antioxidants were actually in there. And then we did the same thing, 7 days later, 3 days later. And she said, what people don't realize is once you pick a fruit or a vegetable, within 24 hours of picking it, 70 to 80% of the antioxidants just degrade.
Wow.
And if you refrigerate it, you actually get it for about 3 days. And if you freeze it, it actually, you lose 80% in 7 days. So you lose 80% in 3 days if you refrigerate, 80% in 7 days if you do it. And so here we are, she was joking. She's like, everybody buys those Odwalas thinking they have, all these antioxidants in them. She's like, there's none left by that. Like the carbs and fat are very stable molecules, but these antioxidants are very unstable molecules, and any amount of processing and handling, and even just being not connected to the plant anymore, just goes away. And so I was like, oh my God. So what do you mean? Like, what's the answer here? She's like, the answer is you grow your own food in your backyard. And I'm like, well, that's not practical for everybody. Like, but that is what the science shows. A mass spectrometer, that's the device she used. But she used a mass spectrometer to basically analyze these things. And I was like, you got to write a book on this. And she's like, no, I can't write a book on this. We're funded by all these ag companies. I'm like, oh my God, like literally I was sitting across the table.
Oh, wow.
Conspiracy theory. This is like really a real professor telling me the story, across the table. And I mean, I was just aghast. I remember that day.
That's awful.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, this is where kind of the more we can go back to basics, I think kind of the better off we are. But that isn't all the solution. I think, my own health journey, I've come to realize that the answer is diet, exercise, and for some people, given their genetics, also kind of medicinal intervention. I used to be very, very, very anti-meds, and I was very much around, kind of, hey, let's just do this 100% naturally. But I think as I've realized, our genetic set points are just so varied that sometimes some people start and they have lots of buffer. They can do a lot of things wrong before they kind of cross the line and end up, for example, as a diabetic. And some people start right next to the line.
Yeah.
Almost can't do, almost no matter what they do, they're going to end up going over the line. But diet, exercise, plus the right interventions, which could be medicinal, can take them back. So I think that's, those are some of the things that we've come to realize.
Yeah. This has been really, really, really interesting, and I'd love to have you back on and talk more. We didn't really even get into the whole insurance piece, which I think is really, really important. And I will ask one final question on that. Has COVID affected your business at all in that way, and how has that changed how you guys are doing things?
Yeah, I mean, so we have our three products. So our life insurance product, our Medicare supplement product, which seniors buy on top of their base Medicare that the government gives them. And then we also have this new auto insurance product that's come out. And I think that the auto insurance largely unaffected. We just started selling it, and we really just came to realize that being health conscious really helps you avoid early dementia. And a lot of your senior accidents are actually caused by people who have early dementia. And so screening people for that actually is, good for them, healthier for them. It's, we all have a parent who we're trying to get off the road. I mean, I certainly do. And every time I bring it up with my parent, they're like, wow, 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 I'm fine. What are you talking about? And I'm like, no, you need to get off. But but we found kind of, the better you take care of your health, the lower your development of dementia, even if you have bad genes for it. People think it's all genetic. It's not actually. You can cut the onset risk in half by living a health conscious lifestyle. The life insurance, honestly, people have been buying more of it. And, they're just more, I think we've all realized the fragility of life a little more, and obviously just seeing more mortality. I think, if you think about it, we probably haven't seen this much worldwide mortality really since World War II at this scale. And I think that's making everybody just understand that, hey, you know what, these products, you don't buy them just because you're scared. You buy them because life's unpredictable, and you want to make sure that the people around you are taken care of in the event something unfortunate does happen. And so that's kind of that business has continued. I think the last part is our Medicare supplement product. Really the seniors that we talk to are more financially careful now than ever. And so if they can save money, they're just happy. They're like, look, I'm one of these seniors. I walk all the time. I do this, I do that. I'm not on 20 meds because I've been taking great care of my health. And if you can save me some money, that can make my retirement money go farther. and so they've appreciated that, especially in the last year of what's happening. I think in general, though, the bigger, more macro thing, which I hope is the outcome of this, is we all realize, this is still COVID is still something that affects those with comorbidities more.
Yeah.
And, while now the vaccine's out and hopefully we're all protected, I think we all have come to realize, first, COVID may have other versions that's going to come out and variants, and we're going to have to deal with that. And second, in general, we probably also are going to have, now that this has happened a few times, I don't know about you, but I don't really think we're not going to have another virus coming out of some part of the world in
Absolutely.
the next 10 years again. I mean, as awful as that is. And so I think that people are hopefully realizing, hey, the best protection is to just put yourself in the best health you can. Because, science can save us, but science takes like a year to save us.
Normally it takes a lot longer.
It takes a lot longer normally, but I am a believer in science. I do think kind of the companies that develop this kind of save the world right now. Credit to them. But it takes a while. And in the meantime, a lot of people get sick. And so your best defense is just to try to keep your health as good as you can, as best as you can. And I think that's something that's important. And I think people have realized it even more important now than maybe a year ago.
Yeah. How can people find Health IQ and get and start looking at how to get the service?
Yeah. So, if you just go to our website, you can, submit your information and we'll help you basically get, any one of our insurance products. You can also either on the website or in our app, basically get a daily quiz that we send you, and you can, it's a little quiz, but it gives you the answer after each question. So you kind of learn, it's kind of micro learning, as we call it. And, you'll just get a little more health conscious, and, this is not something that happens overnight. You just have to be interested and have to want to learn. And the same way you got to learn how to, fix your sprinkler system in your yard, which I had to do during COVID because nobody would come to fix it. So we open up it's like when we need to do things, we learn, we open up a YouTube video, we figure out how to do it. We go and get the glue and, we figure out how to fix it. And so I always say it's not that dissimilar. You just have to have the interest and desire to just learn how to repair your own body and how to take care of it. And so, but we have these, vetted quizzes that we've made sure are kind of scientifically as accurate as we can. All the new research comes out every day, as you know. But, but there's lots of different resources out there. But I would just say it's mostly interest. We found actually the biggest risk differential is the difference between the people who say, I am going to try to change my health destiny, and the people who say, what will happen will happen. And as long as you're not in that second camp, we have found you literally can truly change your level of morbidity and mortality. You just have to care.
You just have to try. Yeah, you just have to want to. That's right. Munjal Shah from the CEO of Health IQ. Go find them on the online and work to get better at your health and maybe even better insurance rates. So thank you for being here on Power Lunch today. Thank you for spending some time with us. We will see you tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. You can go to the website at powerlunch.live to check out the schedule. And until tomorrow, we'll see you then. Have a great day.